How's it going, everybody? I am DeanoGTO, and today we're going to be talking about the FCM 50T, the Tier 8 preferential matchmaking premium heavy tank for the French, and I'm going to give my general opinion on it and how I think you should try and play it if you do have one, give my general recommendation on it, and things like that. So, just going to cut straight to the chase in regards to whether or not I think you should get this thing. The short answer is no. Long answer is pretty much just the rest of the video. So, this tank here has a bunch of really annoying problems. So, the first one is power creep. Now, this is going to sound weird, but the main competitors to this tank, back when it first came out, were things like T-44, Pershing, and Centurion 1. What's one thing that's happened with all of those vehicles, as time has gone by, that has just changed them completely and made them significantly better than they were? They all have turret armor now that's actually usable. Pershing less so than the others, but all of them have decent turret armor at least. This thing has the same turret armor that the T-44 had about 3 years ago. And in case you didn't realize, that's really shitty by today's standards. And it really can't bounce anything. 120mm of armor is absolutely nothing in today's game. Like, that's garbage. Now, things like the IS-6, their armor kind of works because it's just so... it's such a narrow area you have to shoot. Like, you have to hit, like, right here, or, like, right here, in order to actually be able to penetrate it with 150 armor. 120, and given how massive an area you have to shoot on this thing, like, it's... this entire area, like, this... pretty much this entire zone here, if you just hit it, you're going to penetrate it, and plus it has a massive... it has a massive fucking cupola on the top as well, and it's just such an awkward vehicle because you have to play it hull down because the hull is absolutely gargantuan. I mean, look at the size of this damn thing. Like, let's just compare it to the IS-6. So, just flicking between the two, the FCM 50T makes the IS-6 look like a medium. It's honestly kind of insane. And then we compare it to the KV-5. The tragic thing is, the size difference is nowhere near as big as you'd expect. This thing weighs 100 tons. This thing here was 55. There's a 45-ton difference between the two. So, I don't know, like, this thing here, its size is just absolutely just insane. It doesn't make any sense for why, like, this thing is just so massive. And the thing is, it's probably just a little bit shorter than the KV-5 is long. And it's probably a little bit taller than the KV-5's hull. The turret is almost certainly longer than the KV-5's turret, like this way, and it's not as tall as the KV-5's turret. But that's such a huge side profile, it's nearly impossible to miss, and every time somebody sees one of these things, like, if you're not tier 6, you're going to have no problem whatsoever penetrating this thing. It is an absolute just chore to play. It is no fun whatsoever, and I really dislike this tank. And it also has some issues when it comes to gun handling. So, it has 240 alpha per shot. Now, 240 alpha per shot would be perfectly usable if it was consistent in any shape or form. But it isn't. It's incredibly inconsistent. It just seems to be one of those tanks that just doesn't like to hit where you're actually looking. And if you don't fully aim every shot that you fire, you're not going to hit anything. Because this gun, if you don't fully aim, the shot's just going to go to the top left or the top right of the reticle, and it happens far more often in this tank than any other tank that I've really played. It's a very French gun in that regard, because if you've ever played the ARL V39, at least the classic version of the ARL V39, then you'll know what I'm talking about with that, because this tank here, its gun is just so inconsistent. It's not, it's honestly kind of a joke just how inconsistent it is with .36 accuracy. And apparently a 2.3 second aiming time. I kind of want to call bullshit on that as well, because the aiming time on this thing feels like it's about 3 seconds. It feels so long, and it doesn't really make sense as to why, because the alpha damage is just so insignificant in comparison to most of the other vehicles that it's against. Like the KV-5's aiming time feels faster than this thing, which is bizarre. But yeah, that's the thing. So, for the most part, there's not really too many advantages to this tank. Well, the main advantages of this tank are that it has a pretty decent credit per damage ratio. So if you don't know what that is, it's pretty much like the the cost for a shot of AP on this gun is like 255 credits per shot for an AP round. And of course now, of all times, my internet's choosing to kind of mess up. It costs like 255 credits per shot to fire an AP round with this tank. And you do 240 damage per shot. Now compare that to something like an IS-6. IS-6 does 390 alpha, but costs over 1,000 credits per shot. So you can kind of see the pretty big disparity there in terms of like value for damage. So in theory, this thing here has a way better value for damage, but the problem is getting the damage out with this tank because it's just so bad at doing it. Really, that's pretty much the main thing I'm trying to get across to you. It's just not able to hit the shots that it needs to hit in any sort of consistent manner, and that's the main thing that you kind of want, because tanks like the KV-5, the IS-6, the reason why their inconsistent guns work is because they can play at close range where the inconsistency of their guns is limited. Like, it can't be, like the guns can't be just insanely inconsistent because you're playing at such close range that the shots are going to hit. And can you please shut the hell up? So, because those tanks are able to play at that range and they're able to minimize basically the weakness of their guns, this thing here can't really do that by comparison. Plus, it takes critical damage like nothing else. Like this thing, it feels like a light tank, and the weird thing is that actually feels like an appropriate description for this tank. It feels like a light tank because every time it gets hit, it loses something. The gunner and the commander in this thing die every other hit, and if somebody just shoots the cupola on this thing, the commander is just instantly dead. Pretty much, like I think the only time the commander's not just instantly dead is whenever it's like another FCM 50T, which I think is the case here, or like a tank with like a 75mm gun. My luck when it comes to the commander has been absolutely horrendous. But hopefully, like if this FCM 50T, this enemy FCM 50T continues to try and like fight me, well, I'm definitely gonna reload him because my crew is kind of OP, and I've got all like the best equipment I can put onto the tank on it. So I think in a head-to-head gunfight, like I should win that 9 times out of 10. But probably the most annoying thing about this is I have a really good crew in this tank. I have an AMX M451 crew in this thing. And that's a pretty good crew. Like it's on its third skill, and it's like I think it was like 80 or 90% in third skill. Like it's a pretty damn good crew. It's better than average, I'd say. So the fact that the gun is still this inconsistent is kind of tragic. Like because the tank could be pretty good, but at the ranges you're typically playing this thing at, and I apparently can't penetrate that. But at the ranges you're typically playing this thing at, you really can't make use of the damage output of this tank. And I've just noticed my team is absolutely just falling apart. Shit. If you haven't noticed, we haven't killed a single enemy tank yet. Like, we haven't been doing too badly on this flank, but on the other flanks, apparently we have just fallen to pieces. And in a head-to-head fight with a Type 9, I do not feel confident about my chances, but I kind of feel like I have to do something in this match. So let's prioritize killing the other FCM. And then hopefully just outrate a fire this Type 59. Because I am going to out-reload the Type 59. Like my reload on my Type 59 is like 7 seconds. And that was a really lucky hit. So my reload in my Type 59 is like 7 seconds. This thing here has like a 5.6 second reload. That's one of the main advantages of this tank. It's just a shame that this thing can't play at that sort of range because it just loses its health too quickly to really make use of its gun in any sort of meaningful way. Oh shit, I didn't even think of that. That was a dumb mistake. I always forget that there's a tank destroyer position down there that is easily able to hit you whenever you go to that spot. That was a pretty bad misplay there. Shit. Well, there's no real way we're going to win this, so I may as well just try and do as much damage as possible before eventually being killed. Because I have a feeling the enemy tanks are probably going to try and come up over this ridge at some point. But at least I still have my commander alive, so I should be able to spot things before they get to us. Really? God damn it! What? Like, see, that's the other problem with this thing. Because it's such a massive machine, it is incredibly easy to spot. Its camo is absolute garbage. So, yeah, like even though that was a pretty okay game, the games are nowhere near as like bizarrely like even though I described that as an okay game, that was actually a pretty good game for me in this tank, given my recent experience with it. If all the games were like that, this tank would be pretty good, but they're nowhere near even close to that most of the time, and that's the problem. The tank is just not fun to play in any shape or form. It really is a painful tank to play just in general. And it's kind of sad because it is a vehicle I had a lot of nostalgia for, and if I'm honest with you, I kind of want feedback on this video in regards to like anybody else that has this vehicle and has played it anytime recently. How do you play this thing? Because the only times I've been able to really make use of this tank is at either medium to long range, typically long range because this tank just does not like being hit whatsoever, and the crew and all just seems to die so easily. Or what was the other thing? Or at like close range, but using your teammates pretty much as damage sponges. But the problem with that is your tank's so massive that usually if you try to use your teammate as a damage sponge, they don't wind up hitting you anyway because you're behind them. Like using like the damage sponge tactic works in tanks like T-44 when you're using like a IS-3 as cover because your tank's smaller than that. But in a tank like this, it doesn't work. But yeah, that's just to show you like the rough credit income for like a loss in this tank. So it'd be 42k without any sort of modifiers, and I spent 8,000 credits on the repair of the vehicle, 3,000 credits on a consumable, and about 3,600 credits on ammunition. So let's round that up and make it about that's 9,000, 12,000 credits for the overall maintenance of the machine, 3,000 extra credits for the consumables. So that's roughly around 15,000 credits taken off of the 42. So that would have been about 27,000 credits normally without the special event that's currently ongoing. That's just rough maths, so probably like one or two off, but still, 27 or 28,000 credits is not particularly good credit income. And I really don't think this is a tank you can really recommend because you can do that sort of damage easily in tanks like the IS-6 if you know how to play them right. Especially in tanks like the Super Pershing, because the Super Pershing is actually very annoying to fight. Never mind, like actually, here's the thing with the Super Pershing. I was about to praise the Super Pershing an immense amount, but then I remembered one pretty serious weak point about this machine. So I was going to say like, never mind when people fire HE at this thing, but then I remembered artillery. Whenever artillery hits near this tank with their HE rounds and their large splash damages, this tank takes more damage than any of the others from my experience so far. This tank takes just a ridiculous amount of damage from high explosive splashes from artilleries in particular. Like, it does not like getting hit by HE. It's incredibly resistant versus AP and heat and the APCR, but versus high explosive, if it hits, if it's an artillery that lands a shot like here or something, this thing is going to take like 400, maybe 500 damage. It's not very well protected when it comes to HE just in general. So yeah, that's one thing to be aware of. Oh well, unless they hit the spaced armor gun mantlet and the spaced armor front hull armor. But this thing here, it's too much work for the amount of damage you wind up doing. Especially when you have options like the Super Pershing, which is also a preferential matchmaking vehicle. Just the Super Pershing, you just have to be willing to deal with a relatively slow speed, and you also need to be willing to deal with a gun which is even more consistent. But the thing with the Super Pershing, you can actually play at close range to minimize the inconsistency. Whereas the FCM, like, that's as close a range as I've ever played this thing. I got very lucky to survive as long as it did. So, yeah. Let me know if you guys have one of these things. And if you do have one of these things, let me know how you make use of it, because I would be receptive to learning how to play this thing better than I know how to right now, but I've been trying to use the tactics I used in this thing back whenever I was pretty decent in this tank. but they don't really seem to work anymore because the game has changed around it, and this tank playstyle just doesn't really work anymore. Plus, whenever you actually try to play this thing at long range, the way you're supposed to play it, from my personal experience back in the day, you just wind up with a bunch of muppets in the chat just screaming at you because you're a heavy tank and you're not taking damage for the rest of the team. The armor on this thing just feels worthless, is basically what I'm trying to get across to you. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys think of this video in the comment section below, and let me know if you do have one of these things, what did you think of it? Because personally, I never thought I'd say this here, but I think I might trade this thing in next time the trading system comes around, and maybe get an STA too. Yeah, so I've already said like the stuff right in the video, so yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. I hope to see you in the next one.